So after watching this experiment, we're going to talk about a few things afterwards. So first of all, one of the parallels you might could draw from this is Nazi Germany. Among lots of other things in history, but relatively recently in history, would be the Nazis. And I need to be very careful when I say this, because Nazis were horrible, terrible people. But this experiment showed us how that can happen. So we think of Nazis are the bad guys, and that's definitely true. But let's go back to 100 years ago in Germany, and if you were an 18-year-old male German, you would be in the Nazi Party, presumably, and not every German was evil. There were certainly evil people, especially higher up in the Nazi Party, and they did evil things. But this experiment shows us, unfortunately, that under the wrong circumstances, very regular people can do very evil things. So in this case, it was actually way easier to not do an evil thing. The only thing you had to do was walk out of the room. And sure, that would be a little bit awkward, but that's it. You just it had to be a little bit awkward. You had to defy the authority figure in the white lab coat and say, yeah, even so, I don't feel comfortable doing this. Now, if you were a 21-year-old Nazi and your supervisor said, we're going to have you work, do some terrible things to Jews, now you are faced with a moral choice, except your circumstances, if you defy that authority figure, are much more problematic at that point. So this experiment was a very sad experiment to see that regular humans, under certain circumstances, can do evil things. But they've actually done this experiment lots of times, and they've modified a few things. So think to yourself, what do you think could be done? We set up this experiment the way it was. What do you think could be done to make less people go all the way? So in the original conditions of the experiment, 2/3 of people, 67% of people, went all the way to 450 volts. So I want you to think to yourself, what could be done differently in the experiment to make less people go all the way, or more? And in class, I'd have you write down things, but we actually know the answers to this. So here's some modifications of the experiment and the percentage that go all the way. So if the teacher is choosing the shock level, only 3% go all the way. It's kind of sad, actually, that 3% would still go all the way. So the doctor says, look, I'll let you decide when you want to stop this experiment. Apparently, still 3% of people choose let's just go all the way. Let's just do the 450 volt lethal shock. If the teacher, this is one of the core things about, this next one here is one of the core things about conformity in the first place. And that is conformity to work needs to be unanimous. If everybody's doing it, it's very hard to break. But once the first person stops doing it, it kind of breaks the conformity. So once if you think everybody before you has gone all the way, you see a sign-up list for this experiment, and it says Bobby completed the experiment, Susie completed the experiment, and 10 other people that all completed the experiment, that's strong conformity right there. But if you see 9 of the people, or in this case, 8 of the people completed the experiment and 2 did not, then all of a sudden, conformity drops from 2/3 down to 10%. So drastic change in conformity if you are aware that other people also didn't go all the way. Which is basically the main finding from this whole unit, is the goal, I guess, to learn from this entire unit is you want to be that person. You want to be the person that's willing to break conformity. Because you can't rely on other people to do it. Conformity is incredibly strong, but if you realize it's there, then you can be aware of its presence and be willing to break it when necessary. If the experimenter leaves and instead of that guy in the official looking lab coat, another person in a t-shirt is giving the orders, only 20%. If the experimenter leaves and it's still him, but he's giving orders over the phone, that is a lot better. If the teacher is forcing the learner's hand onto the shock plate, so I guess you'd actually be seeing him being shocked. Teacher and learner are in the same room. It's some impressive acting right there to actually see the person being shocked. If it's in an office building instead of a university, so looking a little bit less official. And then the original setup had 2/3. So that's the Milgram experiment. It's probably the most famous experiment on conformity. And that concludes today. I just need you to fill out the form that is on Google Classroom. And then tomorrow we'll move on to other experiments.